What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about Survivor season 44, episode 11. I thought this was the best episode of the season for me. So my name is Rachel.
I'm Alyssa, and I think that even if this wasn't my favorite episode of the season, it's definitely my favorite of the post merge episodes. I feel like this was a really good episode. There was some real stakes. There was a blind side, like a genuine blind side, and it was all just very good.
I was so stressed, nervous this entire episode watching. I was like, oh, wow, this is really good. I feel like I haven't been super stressed or like, okay, caring about the results of a tribal council until this one. And I was like, okay, maybe because I drank coffee before. I was just really buzzing. It was a good episode.
Yeah. I think I watched it pretty late at night and it kept me up. So points to it.
Lots to think about. So we start off this episode. Carolyn, she is mad because she was left out of the vote last week. We saw it some in the preview last week. We see it more fleshed out here. I think, okay, it's understandable that Carolyn would be angry because she's left out. You know, your closest allies didn't include you in the loop. You are going to feel some kind of way. But Carolyn, as usual, herself, she is always over the top. So I feel like other people, when they're angry, they usually play their emotions more cool, even if they are angry. But that's a good thing about Carolyn, you know how she is feeling.
Yeah, and I think also it was nice to see Jam Jam kind of telling Carolyn like it's okay if you need to take time, just figure out what you're going to do when you come back. I think that a lot of times people in Survivor like maybe don't always take the time that they need to feel their feelings. And so I think that feeling her feelings, telling other people what her feelings were, that's some refreshing stuff.
And there was a good secret scene this week of Carolyn, like the day after the blind side. She's talking through her emotions, talking about the evening before. And I feel like we saw some of these kinds of thoughts in the episode, but I would say that secret scene is really interesting. And like we see her work through her emotions. Okay, the next day she's like, okay, Jam, Carson, we are okay, good, like we still need each other. So even though she was maybe super angry with them the night before, she realizes, okay, this is my best bet moving forward. I can't just hold a grudge like other people do and never work with these people again. But she's willing to put those maybe hard feelings aside and go back and work with them because she knows that's her best option.
Yeah, and I think that it really was still Carolyn's best option to work with them, especially with what they were able to accomplish this episode. So I think it was nice to see her go back and work with them, but also for that to be the right choice. Because I think sometimes when someone forgives someone else, it ends up being the wrong choice for
Mm-hmm.
them. Like they get blindsided or something bad happens. But at least for this episode, it was correct.
I agree. And I feel like her being blindsided last week probably helped her hone her radar, hone her gut for this week and her reads this episode, and even reads going into the final few weeks of this show. Because, like, okay, her being left out of the loop and how she was feeling, maybe if she was nervous or anxious or worried that maybe Franny was going to get votes or the vote wasn't going to go her way, she can use that experience from last tribal council moving forward, like, oh, something doesn't feel right, what should I do about it? And I feel like so many Survivor players, when they are voted out, they're like, yeah, I was feeling weird this day, but I just brushed it off as like anxiety or paranoia. So I feel like it's cool to see if she's able to like evolve this kind of emotion or hone her gut more to figure out, okay, what am I feeling and what does it mean?
Yeah, and I love it when people's guts are correct in Survivor. So
It's always more fun rather than the dodo edit of people's guts not being correct, which we see this episode. But we also see Carolyn and her lobster and weird claw thing. It was interesting.
yeah, I was kind of confused by why they decided to show that segment. That feels like more like it should have been a bonus scene
Mm-hmm.
than something in the actual episode. But do what you do, I guess.
Yeah, I'm like, okay. interesting, a swimming scene of them going underwater. It really reminded me of Daniel Strunk and his confessional that was sort of meta, saying like, yeah, if you want screen time, go out in the ocean and start swimming and like go get fish kind of thing. And it also reminded me of Sydney in season 41 swimming scene where she's talking about similar thing here, Carolyn talking about being a mermaid swimming in the water. So I'm like, yeah, if you want screen time, go snorkeling because they always have one of these swimming segments.
Yeah. I always wonder why too, because it's like we know they're on an island. We know there's water. Like we don't need to see it every day, every week.
So we also see Danny is wondering who voted for him last week. He got one vote, and it was his BFF Heidi. But Danny doesn't believe at this point in time that it was Heidi who voted for him. In his exit interviews, he was saying, like, yeah, it really didn't matter if Heidi voted for me or not because he wanted to still work with her. Like, he needed her in certain aspects. So he really didn't care if it was her or not.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting though because he was so convinced it wasn't Heidi, and Heidi was like, it was me. But it seems like her lie that it was Jam Jam might not have worked if Danny didn't care. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting because, like, now that Danny's voted out, it really, like, all of this tension that could have been built between Danny and Heidi is sort of kaput because one of them isn't there anymore, which it does make sense if, like Danny was saying, okay, Heidi is a rational player. Why would Heidi flip on me this early? Why would she be on the wrong side of the numbers and the only voting for me kind of thing? So in that regard, okay, it does make sense. Why would she do it now and do it in a way that it doesn't even work, where you just expose yourself and you potentially cut off that alliance member, which Heidi does say, like, yeah, never in a million years I would have thought he was going to be here today. So she thought the Danny vote out plan was going to work. But I mean, it does make sense from Jam Jam lying and saying, or Jam Jam telling the truth, saying Heidi was the one that voted for you, but Danny thinking that Jam Jam is lying about it because they're thinking Tika is trying to drive a wedge between Heidi and Danny as like a power couple, a power duo. So it does make sense that they would think Jam Jam is lying here.
Yeah, but it's also like thinking Jam Jam is lying. I wonder how they felt when they found out that he wasn't lying, I guess is my ultimate thing. Like, whoo. I feel like that would be a little bit of a wake up call. Like if you thought that one of your allies was voting a certain way and they weren't. So,
Yeah, I think it's sort of funny, sad though. I would have wanted to see Danny and Heidi feud against each other rather than, okay, now here Heidi at this vote, she's left out, her BFF goes, and she didn't even vote him out. So she never really betrayed him to get her way. I feel like it's more fun and interesting when people are in that power couple and one has to turn on the other rather than the person being left out of the vote and their alliance mate goes home. Like, I would have wanted to see them go to war.
yeah, I think also it's interesting because Danny seems to really respect the idea of like someone voting him out and like getting the better of him. So even though Heidi was his like number one, I think if she gets to final tribal, like she might not get his vote because she wasn't the one to kind of slit his throat.
I feel like this Heidi storyline is very interesting, odd also. Like, after the three Tika members, who I feel like probably are the best chances to win the game, Heidi would be maybe the fourth likely person to win, with Lauren and Jamie as like fifth and sixth likely chances to win if they're in final three. Heidi being fourth, I feel like, based off of like what we know about her so far, we've seen more of her relationships, her and Danny being an alliance. But I feel like Heidi has been not voting correctly recently, like ever since the merge, where she got that advantage to take a vote and then now being left out of the loop, and then her not playing the idol when maybe she should have been playing the idol. Like, she has been lucky, sure, she's never been the person with the most number of votes, but 3 times now she's been the person with the second most number of votes. And sure, you can say, yeah, she's got, you know, the guts to not play it, but I don't know, some of these times I'm like, she's just sort of left out.
Yeah, I feel bad for Heidi because it seems like she really could be a strategic powerhouse, but she just like doesn't have the social connections to make it happen. And it seems like that like kind of lack of social connections goes back pretty far. So,
Yeah, which I feel like it's gonna be sort of ugh if Heidi gets one good idol play under her belt and that's what helps her win the game.
yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't like that. I don't like it when someone has like one like big moment that's like a good TV moment and like a good jury moment that then propels them to win the game even if they're like sitting next to someone who had like a more consistent, less flashy game.
Mhm.
So,
Which that's the new era though.
I guess so.
But we get to the immunity challenge. We see last gasp challenge is back, where you have to stay under the grate while the water level rises. For me, I like endurance challenges, so this is fun. I want to know how Carson tested this in his bathtub. Since he's got videos of him doing the 3D puzzles, I want to see how did he do this? Like put a like grate where you put cookies on and then stick that over your tub and fill the tub. Like, how did you practice this?
I'm just confused because I feel like my bathtub would not be deep enough to do this effectively. So, I'm really confused. Also, I feel like in a bathtub, you can't really simulate like the waves. And I feel like
Mhm.
that thing that Jeff mentioned, like, oh, there's a huge swell and now they're all totally underwater. And it's like, you can't do that in a bathtub.
Maybe going to a swimming pool would be better, and then you stick something on the top, and then you, like, simulate the water moving in waves and, like, okay, holding your breath, how to not panic under pressure if, like, you can't breathe or if you have water in your mouth and nose. Maybe that would be a good way to do it. Because 'cause I'm like, "Okay, in your bathtub alone, I don't know, you're just sort of, like, waterboarding yourself."
Yeah. Yeah. I also think it's like, do you have an accurate concept of how long everyone else will last? Because if you're like, oh, I can do this in my bathtub for 3 hours, like, who's to say that the next person can't do it for like 3 hours and 1 minute? So I have a lot of questions about Carson and his bathtub.
Me too. So it gets down to Heidi, Danny, and Jam Jam. Danny drops, and then it's just Heidi and Jam Jam. I really like how new people are winning the challenges every week. You know, Franny was the only person that has won multiple times. And here this season, it's not just one person winning everything, not just one person going on that immunity run like we see in other seasons. So I do like how these challenges are playing towards different people's strengths, whether it's endurance or puzzles or more of the obstacle course or balances. I'm like, that's really cool that different people we can see win and see the reactions to winning.
Yeah, I also think it's so sweet. Like Jam Jam's story about how everyone back at home is going to be so proud of him. I was like, oh, sweetheart. So I think also having more than one person win immunity makes the immunity challenges actually fun to watch.
Mhm.
Like if you know that one person is always going to be winning, it's kind of like, ugh, why do what? I'll just fast forward past the immunity challenge. Like it's not fun if you already know the ending.
Exactly. Jam Jam winning. It was such a cute moment. I was like, oh, this is amazing to see. Like, as a fan for us watching the show, I would be envisioning myself in that moment having a similar reaction to Jam Jam and like how I would feel in that moment. And it's just so cool to sort of like vicariously live through these other big fans of the show, similar to Carson last week being emotional about the win. So I'm like so happy. It's so exciting to see people win and like fulfill that lifelong dream of winning immunity on Survivor.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
But I do wonder if Danny feels sad. He was always so close to winning immunity, like top 3, but he never won individual immunity.
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
Yeah, I would be like, dang, you know, especially as like a buff dude who in his preseason stuff, he works out, all of that jazz. I'd be like, sort of bummed that you never won individual immunity.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe he did well enough that he'll be invited back and he can try to win individual immunity then.
Next time. So we get back to camp. Jam Jam wins individual immunity, and we see the Danny group of four: Danny, Jamie, Lauren, and Heidi. They are thinking, okay, let's vote Carson out of the Tika 3 because Jam Jam's immune. The fake plan is going to say we're splitting the vote between Lauren and Jamie. Carolyn's radar is on point here. She's like, Danny, is this the fake plan or the real plan? Hee hee. Which straight up, I was like, okay, I love it. Love that you just literally asked that to someone's face. And then Carolyn is worried that the other group is going to vote for Carson.
Well, I think it's interesting because, like, if you ask someone, like, oh, is this the fake plan or is this the real plan? Like, they might be, like, shocked enough for a second that, like,
Mhm.
their real thing shows through. Like, yeah, just, like, shock him into telling you the truth. Or, like, if he starts stuttering after that, like, there's a lot of ways that you can, like, tell if something's a fake plan or not. I also think, given the fact that, like, the four of them were all chatting together, it would be really weird if Danny's plan was to split the vote with two people he was just, like, chatting with. So, yeah.
Carolyn had some good reads this episode. Her sussing out that Danny was acting weird, especially because Carolyn, Danny, we've seen them have some beef on the island. So Carolyn realizing, yeah, Danny, even though we maybe don't like each other too much, he is acting weirder than usual towards me. And then also Carolyn realizing, hey, how her perception is for other people, she realizes, yeah, other people underestimate me. Other people think I'm just kooky and maybe I'm not a threat. So the other group is less likely to split the votes or do something like that because they don't view me as, valuable or a potential winner. So they're probably targeting Carson because Jam Jam is safe and they're not targeting me, Carolyn.
Yeah. So it was just spicy. I love that Carolyn was finally getting, like, some respect for, like, having the correct reads, and people trusted her read. And so I feel like it would have been really easy for someone to just be like, oh, Carolyn, you're being paranoid. But I think the fact that, like, both Carson and Jam Jam, like, put weight on the fact that she was
Mhm.
worried was really good. So
The threesome's back together. Jamie and Lauren, sort of confusing this episode. We see them say multiple times, yeah, we should vote Carson out. Carson is better at puzzles. He has actually won immunity. He is in the Tika 3. He is in the majority. If we don't vote a Tika out, they have the majority. They can just pick us off one by one by one. So we should vote Carson out. And they compare him to Danny. Danny hasn't won individual immunity yet. Danny is worse at puzzles. Danny isn't in that Tika 3 majority. We see them say this multiple times, and then we even see Jamie say something along the lines of, like, yeah, me and Lauren have all the power this week. They are there, they could be the swing votes here. And then they literally gave up all of their power and then chose to not vote Carson out. Like, you should have voted Carson out here.
yeah, it was confusing. I mean, I think either way, Carolyn probably plays her idol, and so it wouldn't matter if Jamie and Lauren tried to vote Carson out or not. But it is weird. I wonder what made them change their mind, because I don't know. I think the only thing I didn't like about this episode is that it focused so much on the three that I kind of was left wondering what everyone else was thinking. Like, I knew that Heidi was trying to hide from Danny that she voted for him, but I didn't know, like, what Heidi was thinking going forward. I knew Danny was, like, super cocky and wanted Carson out, but like, it felt like I only got parts of each of their thought
Mm-hmm.
processes.
I do hope next week we get like flashback information about how Carolyn, Jam Jam, and Carson got Jamie and Lauren to flip their vote and to vote Heidi instead. So maybe they were saying, like, yeah, let's split the vote, Heidi and Danny, to prevent for an idol. And so that's why the other two women voted for Heidi. And they're like, okay, Tika 3 is going to vote for Danny. One of them goes if one of them plays the idol. But how did they get persuaded to let's split up Danny and Heidi to prevent for an idol rather than let's split up this 3-person alliance that they said can vote them all out if they keep the 3-person alliance in? Like, how did they get manipulated or switching their votes so much to not target that 3-person alliance is what I want to know. And I feel like as a jury member, if people are saying, I don't know, I feel like that move to not target the 3-person alliance, I feel like would discredit you a lot in the jury, depending on what their reasoning is. Because for me, watching, it's like, okay, Jamie and Lauren, they're seeming to play a more passive game. They're going with the flow. They're just going with the numbers to save themselves one more day. They're like, okay, let's go with a 3-person majority because it saves us one more tribal council. Compared to, I like when we've seen Danny and Heidi say, like, yeah, let's use the idol to save Franny because we need her as an alliance member to try to not become goats in this game, to not get picked off. Compared to Jamie and Lauren, like, let's just go with the majority.
Well, I think it's interesting because we have seen the strategy of like, as long as it's not me, work. And I mean, I guess all the more power to them if that actually wins them the game. But I also feel like we're kind of in an era of Survivor where like getting to the end isn't enough, especially because I feel like this jury has a lot of respect for gameplay. So it's not going to be like a bitter jury who's willing to vote for anyone except for the person who voted them off. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, this choice is just sort of odd. Because if you're thinking, yeah, Carson has a good chance to win, Jam Jam has a good chance, maybe they discount Carolyn and you're like, okay, maybe we can't beat Carson or Jam, but maybe they're also thinking, oh, maybe we can't beat Danny and Heidi. So it's a moot point because both of the two sides have two people that we don't think we can win against. So it doesn't matter which way we go. But yeah, I don't know. I would say you wouldn't want to be in a 3-2 going into final 5. You'd rather be trying to be like 2-2 with Heidi and Danny and then vote out Carson here. So it's like a 2-2-2 split going into 6.
Yeah, you would think, but again, hoping for that flashback.
So we see the final 3 being brought up a lot this episode and only being brought up by the Tika members. We see numerous times them saying, yeah, Tika final 3, which is very interesting because we didn't see any other final 3s being made or even a mention of any other combinations of final 3s besides the Tika 3 here. And I do really like how this season we are seeing people stick up for their alliance members in order to move forward as like a cohort, an alliance, a coalition. Like Carolyn here could have easily just let Carson be voted out. We see Carolyn and Jam talking and they were like, Jam Jam says basically, even if it is Carson, it's not one of us. You shouldn't be too stressed. And Carolyn's like, no, we need Carson around. And she realizes, yeah, even though Carson might be threatening, Carson could win the game. We need him for a few more votes. So we should work to keep him around. Similar to Danny saving Franny with the idol, like you are making a move to try to win the game, not just last one more day.
Yeah, I do think about the final 3 stuff. It's interesting because we specifically see Carolyn say to Carson, like, you're not a part of my final 3, just kidding. And like that feels like foreshadowing to me. So I don't know if I'm just like reading way too much into things, but I think it would be interesting if like 2/3 of the Tika 3 end up at the final 3 and Carson isn't there. But
I think that's how it will have to be because if there's Final Four fire making, 2 of them, I feel like you have a high chance of having 2 of them at the end of the game because if one wins immunity, they bring one, they have to send one to fire if in a 3-person alliance. So I could see one of the Tika 3 having to go to fire at Final 4, and that's why it wouldn't be a Final 3 Tika because one of you's got to go to fire, and that's more like chance.
yeah.
But 2 of them can make it probably most likely. I do wonder though, it would be interesting to have a final 3 with 3 members of your OG tribe because like how do you differentiate yourself truly against 3 people that you've been together since the start?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could, I guess it depends on which two it is, because I feel like Carolyn can distinguish herself from both Jam Jam and Carson. And I think Jam Jam can, I think actually all of the Tika 3 are kind of distinguishable just because they all kind of fit different roles. Like Jam Jam is very much the social player, Carson is the one who's like smart, and Carolyn's the one who's, wild and out there. And I think Carolyn could, like, for example, be the one to say, I was the one who knew Carson was getting voted out, and I was the one who played the idol for him, which is how the three of us all got to this point and were able to make it to the final three. And Jam Jam could be like, I protected Carolyn when people brought up Carolyn's name. And, so I think actually, even if they've been together from the start, it's actually pretty easy to distinguish at least those three.
I agree. I feel like with this three, if it's Tika final three, it would be so fascinating because I do agree that these three have different stories. Even though they have been working together a lot of the times, they do have things that they could say to differentiate themselves compared to other people that might not have things that they can differentiate themselves. But yeah, I'm like Carolyn with the Josh vote. She could say, like, that was more me. Carson and Jam Jam leaving Carolyn out on the Franny vote, they can say that's more them. Carson going and switching tribes and having to build new relationships, that's really good for Carson. Carolyn with the idol, Jam Jam being like on the bottom for 3 weeks in a row. They all have such different stories and things that they could say that's on their Survivor resume. I'm like, I think it'd be so fun as a final three. I would want to see them battle it out because they have like good resumes.
Yeah, I don't think that they'll end up battling it out just because I do think that one of them will, end up falling in one way or another. But it would be fun.
So we get to tribal council. This is a spicy, awkward tribal council. We see Carolyn and Danny sort of beefing, Carolyn and Lauren sort of on opposite sides of remarks. Jeff being a little bit like sassy, rude, but Carolyn is not taking any of his snide remarks.
I thought it was so funny when Jeff was like, well, why are you mad at me? It's like, Jeff, you just told her that she needs to eat and sleep. Like, do you not understand how that's condescending? Like,
yeah, that's the whole point of this game. Like, what?
yeah. So I thought this was interesting though, because I thought Lauren and Carolyn's discussion was actually like as respectful as a tribal council discussion can be. Danny was just kind of a jerk, but I thought Lauren and Carolyn were trying to be nice to each other. I could see them still working together in the future, even though they were kind of at odds this tribal council. So
yeah, civilized discussions, even though they're on opposite sides of their conversation, metaphors, discussion. Carson also talked about himself some at Tribal. I thought this was very cute. I'm like, oh, it's such an endearing dude. Like, definitely different, I feel like, from how people viewed him preseason and him selling merch before the game even started. I'm like, Carson seems like a cool kid.
yeah, he's cute.
So I hope we get some more next time. I want to know more about why Carolyn had Lauren's name put down and then she crossed it out and then wrote Danny's name down. Like, what was going through her mind when she was standing at the urn, counting votes on her fingers, seemingly taking a longer time than normal to write the name down. Like, I would want to know what was going through her head in this moment.
What I think could be going through her head is if she doesn't know if Lauren and Jamie have switched, and if she
Mhm.
thinks that Danny will play another idol, she wants to know who number 3 will be and who will go home. Because if she's still planning on playing the idol for Carson and she knows that, or she thinks that Danny might play an idol on himself, you need to know who Lauren and Jamie are voting for if they're not voting for Carson in order to be able to figure out who would go home if 2 idols were played. And so she might in her head be like, well, I think that Lauren and Jamie are going to vote with us and vote, or are trying to vote against Carson, and so their votes will also be negated. And then if everyone voted for either Carson or Danny, and then all of those votes get negated and they vote again, then Carolyn's name is on the block and she probably would go home against like anyone that the Tika 3 would vote for. And so if she throws a single vote on Lauren, if Lauren and Jamie have voted for Carson, then it would be 4 votes Carson, 2 votes Danny, 1 vote Lauren. And then that would mean that Lauren would go home if both Danny and Carson got idols played on them.
Yeah, that's what I think the reasoning is as well. So then I'm like, okay, why did she switch it off of Lauren? Because I do agree, like, if 2 idols were played, you don't want a revote happening, because then, yeah, Jam Jam saved Carson, saved Carolyn, you sort of shot yourself in the foot. You are the prime person to potentially be voted out there, or maybe people flip and vote out Heidi or something like that. So I'm like, yeah, I guess to believe in yourself so much to not have that backup plan and then to cross out that backup plan, I'm like, dang, that's pretty good, because it could have easily been 0 votes cast if 2 idols were played correctly.
But then also maybe it's just like a way to keep Lauren on her toes. Like, oh, someone put my name down. What's going on there?
Yeah, and I guess it, with the votes being so close, like 3-2, if Carolyn did put it on Lauren and the idol wasn't played, like we saw it wasn't played, it would just go to a revote, or yeah, right? Now I'm confused with the numbers, but like if she switched it off of Danny, it would have just,
It would
yeah,
have been,
to Danny, to Heidi. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So then they would have gone for a revote, which I guess could have worked because Danny's still up for elimination.
Well, even if it was a revote, it would be a revote between Danny and Heidi.
Yeah.
And
So she
so
could
as
say,
long as Carolyn wouldn't have gone home, I think it's fine. But the problem is with all votes negated, everyone else is fair game. So
yeah, exactly. So I think Carolyn, she should have played her idol here either way, because she doesn't know if Jamie and Lauren, if they're voting with them or against them, like we've talked about, if they're actually voting for Carson to go home, or if they were swayed and are going to split the votes with them and vote Danny or Heidi out. So basically, playing the idol here ensures that Carolyn's plan goes their way and helps the Tika members, because if they're thinking that Danny has the idol, Danny might play it, all of that jazz. So I think she should have played it here no matter what, even though she technically didn't need to play it because Carson only had 2 votes. There's no way to know 100% whether Jamie and Lauren were with you or against you on the vote. So to ensure Tika stays here, you have to play it.
yeah. Whew. It was a fun and exciting tribal. And I think it was exciting because like I genuinely didn't know who was going to go home. And I feel like even in a lot of the tribals this season that they tried to paint as blindsides, it was just a blindside for the person going home and not really a blindside for the viewer. So
Also, sort of funny, sucky for the people moving forward. They thought Danny had the idol. Danny doesn't, but they're leaving Heidi in with an idol, and she only has 2 more times that she can play the idol, which is a little bit dangerous. So I could easily see Heidi making Final 4.
yeah, or I guess no one left in the game is really like close enough to Heidi that you would play the idol for them, I guess. So Heidi Final 4, that would be fun though, because I feel like Heidi is still kind of a wild card in this game. Like I do think she still has the potential to win. I hope that she doesn't win just because of one idol play, but you know.
Yeah, I'd want to see Heidi be on the right side of the votes.
Yeah.
So Danny does a De Niro impression when he leaves. Maybe we're too young because I did not understand this.
I think it also just took too long. Like I was like, okay, we can like we could have maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like it lasted longer than that. So
Yeah, I feel like that's Jeff's fault. He was just staring at Danny, and Danny just was doing the thing.
Danny was like waiting for Jeff to snuff his torch, and
Yeah.
Jeff was just like, keep
Standing
going.
there, yeah. So awkward, but it's sort of sad though, because I feel like here Carson and Jam Jam are going to realize they have been underestimating Carolyn this entire time because of Carolyn's awesome idol play here. And I'm just gonna be so sad if they flip on each other and vote her out.
Yeah, I hope that Carolyn doesn't go home. Maybe next time can be her time to win immunity, and then everything ends up exploding.
Yeah, and it's like I have Carson's face at tribal council, like to get an idol played on you, to have this work, you can sort of see like the fan in Carson, oh, so excited. But the strategist in Carson's head is probably like, oh, dang, Carolyn, great resume move. We should vote her out. But then to turn on someone that is so sad.
Yeah, to turn on someone who just played an idol on you is like stone cold.
Yeah, but I'm so excited for the end game. It's going to be very interesting. We have a lot of people that you could potentially want to root for. A lot of spiciness going to happen between the Tika 3 here. And like we said, I feel like Tika 3 up there in the top 3 spots to win if they're in final tribal, Heidi 4th, Lauren, Jamie 5th and 6th, just based off of like the edits, what we know about them, stuff like that. But sort of sucks to see again so many people under edited.
Yeah, I feel like there's worse under edits. I feel like of
Mhm.
all of them, Heidi is the worst edited despite being in the fourth place slot. So I hope that we get more Heidi. I also think more Jamie, but since Jamie, I still think probably isn't going to win, I understand kind of why she's under edited, but
People online are saying Jamie's doing a gay blur.
whatever they say.
So yeah, definitely let us know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. Do you think that Carolyn should have played the idol or should not have played the idol? Do you think Carolyn is going to be targeted now because people are no longer going to potentially underestimate her as much as they have been? Let us know in the comments. As always, we love talking Survivor, so we will see you all next week.